Welcome to the Mavens of Marketing, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Rachel Durkan.
And me, Kerry Barrett. We talk all things marketing, innovation, sales, and business growth strategies, and the standard tried and true marketing techniques.
Come for the conversation, stay for the savvy insights.
And the borderline inappropriate jokes.
Welcome to this episode of the Mavens of Marketing. I am one of your co-hosts, Kerry Barrett, owner, founder of Kerry Barrett Consulting. I help my clients expand their visibility and credibility in both the media and the digital world through the use of effective and compelling video. And then, of course, my fabulous co-host, the lovely and talented Rachel Durkan. How are you?
Hello. I'm so excited to be here as always. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel Durkan. My company's Paradigm Marketing and Design. We are a web branding and strategy marketing agency, and we work with clients to help them create marketing to sales cycles and infrastructures that will help them shorten their sales cycle and increase the number of leads that their sales team is having.
A lot of words that I don't understand.
I use a lot of fancy words. I feel like if I can throw some lingo in there, you'll think I'm smarter than I am. That's my strategy.
And I do, but you already had me at sales cycle and whatever the heck else you said. That's not my area of expertise. Anybody who knows me knows that I was about a year in till I knew what divest meant. And that's a true story.
I use Google often to figure out not only what things mean, but how to spell them, because I spell one of my biggest weaknesses. And I'm a big believer that some weaknesses you should work on and some you should just work around.
You should own.
My poor spelling is one that I work around, and I use all of the wonderful technology here, but I spell so poorly that Word can't figure out what I'm trying to say. And I have to often Google things to see the proper spelling, because I'll be like, did you mean? So
I've been the recipient of some of those emails that you did not Google.
Well, difference is when I'm close to you and I know you and like you, I've just given up all pretenses of looking cool, and I just write. There'll be a typo and be like, I'm cool with that.
Yeah,
she knows what I'm trying to say.
I get it. Sometimes I'm like, there's some real mental gymnastics that's going on here, but I appreciate it. My brain appreciates the workout. And with that said, speaking of working out our brains, I say this with all of our guests, and I do mean it. However, I mean it more this time. Our fabulous guest, Danielle Hughes, who is a personality marketer. And I saw that on your LinkedIn profile and I was like, holy shit, I need to talk to her. This is everything that I believe in, but I didn't know it was a thing, if you will. So with that said, please introduce yourself to our audience. Tell them what you do and why it's important. And then let's get down into the meat and the heart of what it is that you help your clients do as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. First of all, I'm super excited to be here. Love the energy. More so I was listening to the intro on the podcast this morning about how you say we get to things that are borderline inappropriate. And I'm like, we might just cross the border is all I'm saying. We're not big. Let's just cross the border. Well, like jump over it. Let's just forget the border.
We can dance across it.
With tequila.
So anyway, I'm Danielle Hughes, and I am the Chief Personality Officer of More Than Words Marketing. And I like to say we are a marketing and branding consultancy, but what I do is help individuals and institutions put more of themselves into their message.
Why is that so? I mean, I have an idea, but in your experience, why is that so important?
I mean, I just think that people buy from people. They don't buy from companies. And if you are not representing yourself in an, I hate this word, but there's no better word, authentic way.
I knew you were going to say that.
So like everybody kills all my favorite words and then I don't know what to do with them. But I do think that there is there's a huge importance in authenticity, because I think people smell bullshit from a mile away, from a business, from anybody in life. Mm-hmm. And so the more you can just recognize who you are and bring that into your message, first of all, the stronger the connection is going to be, the more likely you are to have clients, fans, etc. But you won't have to pretend to be something at home and something in the office or something with your clients. Like you can be who you are and, bring yourself to work, so to speak.
What I love about this is we've been doing these, how many podcasts have we done now, Kerry? A lot. And I hear over and over again, the common theme in the last 6 to 12 months has been authenticity, over and over and over. And I think the word's overused, but I think the concept is certainly just taking off.
Yeah.
I think it ties into business, but it ties into a piece of, when I think of authenticity, I think of vulnerability. People, we just came out of, or we're still in this social media age where like, you're not what you appear and you can be anything and you can position yourself anyway. Like you can be having a terrible day, but then you take a picture with your kids and you're like, great day with the kids. And then meanwhile, everything's broken and like, I'm hysterically crying and like borderline gonna lose my mind and thinking about selling them. I won't really do that, but it's crossed my mind.
I have said that for years. Yeah. I tell my son, I'm like, I will sell you.
I'll take a loss, but I will still get rid of you.
But but it makes me, one of the reasons I connected with Kerry so much is we talked about how much of a hot mess we are. Yeah. I don't think I'll tell them the first story you ever told me, Kerry, but I was like, well, we are now friends because get down to the level like I can. It's nice to know that you're not alone in the world of chaos and like everyone else is perfect and you're not. And so I think that when you manage people, when you go to market, when you network, when you talk to people, when you bring it out in your brand, being vulnerable and being okay with it, having the confidence to be vulnerable is so important. So my question, this is a very long segue, is there's a dangerous, in my opinion, factor of articulating vulnerability or authenticity in your messaging because it can be misconstrued as weakness if you articulate something inappropriately. So all that said, how do you make sure that doesn't happen and that you're being authentic in the right way and bringing out your personality in a way that it should be favorably perceived because it's your personality?
So one, I think vulnerability is actually strength because it takes a lot more strength to be vulnerable. Weakness is hiding behind something that you're not. So I wouldn't, and I don't, I think we're moving in that direction too. Like, I totally agree with you, Rachel. I think there is this need for vulnerability, or what I say, connection, right? It's like the more vulnerable you are, the more you're going to connect with other people, the more you're like, I see myself in this person, or I relate to this person. But I think what I teach with personality brand versus personal brand is our personality is already on display. Like it's innately baked into who we are. This isn't about revealing all of your private thoughts. This isn't about making yourself uncomfortable. It's where is your line in what you're willing to share with the world and what you're not, and why does that matter to them, right? And in business, it's how do your passions relate to how you do your business, right? Like I have a client who is a writer and a bird watcher, and I was like, and I could give two shits about bird watching, but it's fascinating for her because bird watching as a process is patient and introspective and detailed. And it relates in so many ways to how she does her job because she has to like dig in and do the work. She has to wait for the ideas to come. She has to be thoughtful. And so marrying those two things, that's more what I'm doing is like, how does your passion or how do your interests or how does something that makes you out of the office relate to who you are in the office?
And so it's funny you say that because from a business standpoint, one of the things we do is, let me back up for a second for the audience. I believe strongly that marketing is three things in general, and there's a lot under it, but one is knowing your audience and their wants, needs, and motivations at an intimate level. The second is messaging. How are you going to market and articulating your value proposition in a way that it will resonate with your audience? Because what they think they need is not always what they need. And then third is going to market, which everyone thinks marketing is the billboard, the social post, how you get to them. Whenever I work with a client, I shouldn't say whenever, often we're looking at the value propositions and the differentiating concepts. It's like offense versus defense. So your value propositions, there might be 2 or 3 or 4 of them, are the things that you do that your audience finds valuable, but your competitors might also do that thing. Not talking about it is a detriment because your audience needs it, but talking about it's not going to win you anything because others are saying it. That's defense. If you don't have them, they're going to score on your goal, right? Offense is your differentiating concept. How are you better? How can you solve this problem better than the other guys? And more often than not, people overlook their why and their personality and their core values as a very strong differentiating concept. And it's not the first thing people think about. So is what you're telling me that bringing your personality and your values and your authenticity, that's basically a way to articulate your differentiator to the world. Does that
Yes.
make
Yeah, I
sense?
mean, yeah, so there's so much nuance in what you just said, and I agree with all of it. I call it brand positioning versus value prop, but same idea. And it is, so it's about you, but it's for them, right? It's about you, but it's for your audience. And the more you can be yourself and bring yourself into your message, you're trying to articulate not necessarily what makes you better, because sometimes, to be honest, we're not better than our competition. It's what makes you different. And maybe the way you work or the way you attack a problem or the way you have your relationships with clients is different. And that's going to resonate with certain people. Like I tell my clients, if you're not repelling certain audiences, you're doing it wrong. You want to attract the right people and repel the wrong people. And your message should be doing the vetting for you. Like your message should be so you that only the people that reach out are going to understand immediately what it's going to be like to work with you and what you're going to do for them.
How do you carry that message across? I mean, is it about, is it as granular as the words that you use when you're creating an email or writing a post or putting out a newsletter, to the visuals or the videos? I mean, what goes into bringing all these pieces together in your personality brand?
I mean, ideally it's everything.
Yeah.
But you have to start with your message, your core message, right? You have to start with like, who are you? Who's your audience? What do you stand for? What do you do different? How do you work? Like those are your core components. And then, so you have to start with the more templated stuff. And then it's how do we infuse the personality into that? And then where does that personality live in other pieces, depending on, how you message and how you market. But it should be in your colors. It should be in your logo. Like if you are a vibrant personality and your colors are all like gray, that doesn't make sense. It's a disconnect, right? But if you're very timid and you have like these bold colors, then that's a disconnect too. Maybe you want more like muted colors or matte colors. So there should be some thought to everything as a holistic, but you have to start with the message that you're putting out there because go ahead. No, go ahead, Rachel.
No, go ahead, Danielle.
No, I was just going to say, like, you want the message to be you because you want to be comfortable speaking. Like the idea is that we're not going to be wearing a mask. The idea is that what the message is and who we are on the phone when we talk to clients is the same person. And it's going to be so easy because we don't have to be like, oh God, I forgot that. Oh, I pretend to be this way and I pretend to use jargon and I pretend to use acronyms, but really I don't want to do any of that. I get on the phone with clients and I'll probably curse almost 90-something% of the first call with them. Don't care. And it's never been an issue because that they come to my website, they get my vibe and they understand this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So how does that translate, or does it translate to business? Like what we're talking about is very much for a personal brand. How does that translate to a company of 5, 10, 100, 1,000, 100,000?
I'm so glad. I'm going to piggyback on that because I think the answers are tied together. There's nothing that I find more frustrating than searching out an industry or a business or a service or something and going to their social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram, and it's very like whitewashed. I don't know who works there. I'm going to call, and this person is part of the team, but I can't find anything out about them on their website. Like that sort of thing is so frustrating. And the reason I'm mentioning that on the heels of Rachel's question is because I imagine those two things go together, but it's a much more difficult process when you're talking about incorporating that for a larger group of people rather than one or two individuals who happen to be working together in a smaller business.
So I think that there's two aspects to this. There's the company or the brand itself, the personality, and then what is the individual personality of the people within the organization, right? So the company as a whole, again, you still have to differentiate yourself, right? And, if you are Nike and you're Adidas, for instance, you're selling the same things. Your products are all basically the same, right? So the differentiator is how do you position yourself? What is your attitude? What's the message you're putting out there, right? Like, what are you going to stand for? That's how you differentiate yourself. It could be service as well. 100%, if a company does not have an about page that tells me a little bit about the company or who works there, I do not buy from them.
Yeah.
Because your people are your organization. And that's like, what are your core beliefs? Like, what do you stand for? I don't need your values. I don't need your mission personally. I know a lot of people care about that. I just want to know, like, why did you start this company? Like, what's your why? Like we were talking about earlier, what's your story and who do you want to attract? And then on the other hand, I'm starting to move into corporate to work with employees, because as an employee, you still need to have a personal brand within an organization, because the more clarity you have on what you're good at, the more you can advocate for yourself within the organization, the better you can serve your team, the better you can communicate to your managers. So there's a huge ripple effect of having an individual identity within the constraints of a larger organization.
You know, it's funny you say that. And Kerry, as we're talking about this, I feel like we should bring on an HR culture expert to this, because to this podcast, even though it's about marketing. And the reason being is I'm realizing, even as we're growing, the culture is so important to the message that's articulated and the values that are lived in an organization holistically. And even as we have all these different culture consultants and coaches and leadership coaches in our company that work with our employees, but you know, we talk a lot about making sure people have similar beliefs. Now, that's not saying that diversity is not important, but core values, having similar core values and approaches to things and beliefs in the company is really important. And it sounds to me like that's what you're saying so it's almost like there's an HR component to this, and making sure it all ties together is critically important to the success of a brand as it grows.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday and they said, oh, there's a little bit of psychology to what you do. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I was like, I'm not a psychologist. I said, I've never taken any classes. I said, but I do believe like I have very good EQ. And I think that's also something that I'm trying to cultivate too with individuals. And I think we don't like to look at ourselves with the right lens, right? We're super critical. We don't understand what we're good at from an individual perspective. So you tend to like, if you don't know what you're good at and you're in an organization that you don't really believe in, like it's going to be a struggle. But if you know like what gets you going in the morning and you can marry that, to your point, Rachel, with the organization's values, you know, however those may be, you're going to be more excited to go to work. I had dinner last night with my old boss who just left his job after like 16 years. And he's like, I stayed probably too long because I believed in the mission. I believed in what we were doing. Whether or not the workplace married the actual mission to the workplace is a whole other story, right? Right. So that's the thing. It's like you can walk the walk, but are you talking the talk?
Right.
But the reason people stay is you know, yes, they need a paycheck, but also like they might really believe in what they're doing. And how do you nurture that as an organization, and how do you nurture that as an individual?
And how do you bring that through to the brand promise?
Correct.
You know, as you continue. So how do you write messaging to bring out your personality? Like what are some key like steps somebody can take to achieve this? Like what's the first thing they should be thinking about?
I'm so glad that you asked that, Rachel, because the question I had was, let's say you're writing a blog. How do you make sure that, right, whether you're writing a blog within an organization or as part of an organization, or you're writing it for your own smaller business, what are those steps? What do you need to do? What are the things you need to be thinking about when you're making content, writing emails, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, before you can get to the blog, you have to know your message, right? You have to know what you stand for.
I always try and skip a few steps.
No, can't skip the steps. Like we can't do anything until we know what our brand positioning is, right? Until we know who our audience is, what we do better, what their pain points are, and how we're different and how we're going to make those pains go away. Like,
can I just say though, those are the three. Remember earlier when I was like, marketing is three things and everybody skips the first two and goes right to the.
I know. Sorry.
Literally just. Okay. So Danielle, I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Because companies all the time, they're like, well, we want to do this. And I'm like, well, what is your goal?
Yeah.
They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you mean? How are we going to measure the effectiveness if we're just going to go put out like content that doesn't mean anything? Right. So the first thing is the brand positioning. And then the second thing for me is I have like a fun downloadable on my website called About Me Mad Libs that lets you build your about page or your bio by using Mad Libs. And I give you like 2 serious prompts and 1 fun prompt for each thing. And the idea is like, the problem is most people don't know where to start when they tell their story, right? So this gives you the framework. And B, it encourages you to see where you might have a little fun with how you describe things, right? Like we don't want to start with seasoned executive with 15 years of experience. Like, no, who cares, right? Like, how can you open that up, right? I've been working since, since fax machines were in existence, or I remember, since the iPod was around. Like, how can you suggest your expertise and your age without saying your age, right?
Right.
So it's teasing that out. It's finding out the passions and the hobbies that people have as individuals, because those, like I said, translate into your personality brand. I talk about wine all the time. That's like a thing for me in all my messaging. And it's almost the #1 comment when people talk to me. They're like, so what are you drinking tonight? Or, what kind of wine do you like? And it's because it's an icebreaker, right? It makes me human. It makes me relatable. It could be, that you are a runner, or that you do yoga, or your favorite, you always wear blue, or you have statement earrings, or you wear cool ties. Anything can be part of your personality. It just has to be something that makes you a human being.
And so, in sales, we would call that a pattern interrupt, to grab someone's attention. And what's interesting is I like to start with a vulnerability, because if I bring down my walls, you'll bring down your walls quicker. So if I start with, I suck at cooking. I nearly twice this week, I set the fire alarm off. Like, my husband never does that. I can't spell, but this is the one thing in my life I'm good at. And it is, and it adds credibility. Like, I didn't even say anything about marketing that adds credibility. I just told you all things I was bad at first. And you believe, because I am, that I have vulnerability and I suck at certain things. So if I tell you I am good at something, I must be telling the truth, because I'm happy to tell you what I suck at. So having pattern interrupt is really a great way to bring down people's walls and allow them to connect with you more quickly.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing you said, Danielle, is we had a podcast guest last week, right, Kerry, who was talking about storytelling and creating a visual. So I love when you were like, I was working when the iPod was around. Like, I don't even know what year that was, but it was a long time ago.
Right. And that's the point. It's like,
I'm going to remember that. Yeah.
It's true. Telling those stories with a visual context. I had a client the other day who, and I may have recounted this on the podcast, we were trying to come up with verbiage for a pitch that he's creating. And we were talking about a certain number of clients or conversion. I can't remember exactly what it was. And the number was big. And I'm like, nobody's going to, it's too much. There's, Q1 of 2018, 200,000, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, just say what, two football stadiums worth of people.
That's amazing. Yes.
I get it. Now I understand what you're saying, because I can visualize it, and it gives me, in a very subtle way, like a little bit of a hint of your personality. I'm still giving you information, but it's not as whitewashed. It's creating visual stories, which is, I think, part of that personality brand. Like what you say about how you work and the subtle ways that you can interject that into what you're writing or what you're teaching or posting or whatever it may be. Sorry, I'm skipping the steps again.
Okay. And I would say, for organizations, obviously an organization doesn't have like a hobby or a passion or whatever. So there's other ways to figure that out. You can do what I call like the brand scale, which Rachel, you probably know, where you're like, are you more here or are you more here? And you give a company words and they figure out where on the scale they are. Yeah. And then there's ways on the about page to say like, here's what we do, but we're also known for rooftop happy hours, or ask us about the company dog, right? Again, like you can humanize a company in a smaller way than you can an individual or a solopreneur or a small business, that just makes them sound like people actually work there, as opposed to all we do is make things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I remember when a specific example is when I was first starting my business, I was researching. At that time, I was really focused on public speaking training. And so I was researching who all my competitors were and how were they messaging and what was resonating with potential clients in what they were putting out there. And I remember a few websites like this where it didn't matter how deep I dug. I had no idea if I was a potential client, who was going to be training me, what they were going to be talking about, what their background was, other than this sort of, as a whole, we have this many years of experience, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, who hires these people? I can't figure out who they are. You know, they've got all the right words, but there's nothing in there that allows me to see what it would be like to work with them.
Right. I was just gonna say, it's not who hires them, it's who are they talking to? Right. Because obviously they weren't talking to you.
They weren't talking to me. They maybe talked to other people. I mean, they had a nice website. Clearly somebody's paying them.
I think that comes down to, I don't know that everyone always values messaging. And so my question to you, Danielle, is when you say to somebody, I get the sense that people don't always realize this is something they even need. They feel like they're having an identity crisis, or that people aren't. I actually would say that their concern is that they don't feel like that they're building relationships or resonating with their audience. But the term messaging or message or personality, I don't think a lot of them will say to me, oh, I just need to write another blog or I just need, the about page on my website. How can employees listening or individuals help their team identify the true problem?
So, so I always say I don't work with people who aren't ready. So most people who come to me already know, and they'll use things and expressions like, my content doesn't sound like me. I know I should be writing more, but it takes me forever and I hate it. I don't know what to say. I don't have topics, right? So they kind of know, and maybe they're dancing around it. And then with some probing, you get there. But I think in order to understand message, content, personality, whatever you want to call it, it's all wrapped up in, if your audience is not resonating with your, like if you're not getting clicks, if people are not coming to you, if you're not getting leads, there's a reason. And most likely it's because your message doesn't stand for something, or your message is not speaking to the audience that you want, or you don't even know who your audience is in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many things there.
I think the right term is generic. If it feels generic, it's funny you said that about clicks, and this isn't really about personality, but just to give you an idea of like the human psyche with messaging, we are doing a PPC strategy for a like SEM, pay-per-click marketing. For a client, and they're a medical device company, and we did 2 different ads. The only thing we changed is it was like, it was like the open line, period, call now, open line, colon, call now, or I'm sorry, no, not colon, dash, open line, dash, call now. The dash, and we did the A/B test, did like 50% better. It was incredible.
Crazy.
Over the dash of the period. And it's because when we're reading in our psyche, we stop at the period and we go on our merry way. But the dash forces you to do one more step. And so just tiny tweaks and that's messaging. Tiny tweaks in the message can make a huge difference. But because it's not always scientific, it's subjective, it's very hard to, I would say, to defend the success. And so it's a feeling you get, and this concept of generic over purposeful, I think, is the most important concept of a good message.
100%. And I think for me, a lot of times what I find with clients is they just want someone to give them permission to be themselves. They are looking for it and they don't know how to articulate it. And the minute, I come in or someone comes in and is like, no, you can be this and it will actually be better for your business. It's like the weight goes off their shoulders, the light bulb goes over their head, and then they're just in it. So I just think we're so scared. And like, some of us who are of a certain age, you were raised to fit in, right? There was no individuality in corporate world 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
It was shunned. You weren't supposed to. Absolutely. And we painted ourselves into these little boxes or these parameters that we were not supposed to step a toe out of. Never mind doing a jig over the borderline of inappropriateness.
Generation shift in the workplace. I think that's causing a lot of this, is that need for authenticity and values and a why is definitely causing a lot of this. And I think it's amazing. I'm very excited about it.
100%. I applaud the younger generation for being like, this doesn't feel like authentic. I'm not into this. I'm not buying it. And like calling companies out on their bullshit. Yeah. It's amazing. Like I have never been busier than this past year. And I think it's because people are so desperate for humanity and in their messaging and figuring out what that looks like for them. And to your point, like the vulnerability piece.
It's interesting, just very quickly, because we are coming up on time and we have maybe 2 more questions for you. I did a quick search for synonyms for authenticity. And I got bona fides, genuineness, legitimacy, historicity, historic, itty. I don't know how to pronounce that. You know what, Rachel? Did you get into Google and put in?
I'm just screwing with Google, like I'm figuring out how to spell everything.
Fidelity, credibility, accuracy, truth. I don't know that any of them is exactly right, but nevertheless, maybe I can substitute genuineness or originality for authenticity. We'll give it a whirl. We'll see how it works. All right, so now is the question that everybody is waiting for, the question that we ask all of our guests at the end of the podcast. Danielle, what's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you?
I don't know if it's the weirdest, but when I was 25, 26, I won a radio contest to go to Acapulco. And I took a girlfriend. It was like a 4-day, all expenses paid trip to Acapulco. And it was a radio station. So they were recording down there. We had been out like all night, of course, the night before at like a dance club. It's like 6 a.m. We're like rolling in and they're like, oh, it's our winners, da da da. And my friend proceeds to say fuck on the air at 6 o'clock in the morning on live radio. They were like, get her out of here.
What were they expecting? Like, let's bring her in at 6 a.m. after being out all night. Yeah. I did Acapulco for spring break and it was a wonderful time. And of course I was an angel, but the tacos that you find on the street are so good.
I feel like this was way before there were street tacos, or I was aware of street tacos. How about that?
Yeah. So Danielle, tell our guests where we can find you.
So you can find me at morethanwordscopy.com. And like I said, if you sign up for my newsletter, which only goes out every 2 weeks, you will get my Mad Libs. I tell everyone to do them at least twice because the first time you will, again, be very repressed and restricted. And by the second time, you're going to have fun. And or you can have a couple drinks or some other item of your choosing to loosen yourself up and do them and have some fun that way.
I was going to say a couple of tequila shots or a margarita prior to. I want to download that. I actually do. I took a note as you were saying that. Because I want to download and plug in my information and see how it changes what I have written about myself for my bio on my website and what it draws out of me that I might not even be aware of. I think that's a great tool, even if you don't plan on changing your bio, just to get a little bit of a look at what's in here and how you can combine those two things. I thought for sure, by the way, that your weirdest story was going to have something to do with wine. Given what I know about you, and maybe it did, but you left out that detail.
No, this was like my pre-wine drinking days and just my like crappy beer, bad alcohol, like wine cooler days. So
the natural light. I do remember a few natural light kegger parties in my college days, and I sure am glad that I'm not in that stage any longer. That was a mess. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. With that said, Danielle, it was fabulous to have you as a guest on the Mavens of Marketing. And to our audience, thank you for joining us for this episode. We'll see you back here next week, same time, same place. Bye.
It's a teaser.
Coming up on the next episode of the Mavens of Marketing, Eugenia Kuzmina. If you don't recognize her name, there's a real good chance you've seen her face. It's because she's a supermodel and she is everywhere. But aside from that, and more importantly, she has developed a personal brand and is in a brand influencer status and position. So she's going to be sharing all of her secrets, her tips, and her tricks on how you align your influencing status with the clients that you work for. And as a business, how do you find the right brand influencer? All of that and so much more coming up on the next episode of the Mavens of Marketing.